I have a confession to make. I just love video game essays. They're kind of my guilty pleasure. In fact, the first 2 videos ever published on this channel here were long-form critiques of the Crysis series. Does anyone still remember that one? You know, the one that grilled all the GPUs? Anyway, these videos are now private because, in all honesty, they weren't all that great, and, well, the rest is history. However, I always kind of wanted to go back and give a long-form essay-type video another try. And in a time where the first Ascendant apparently brought more players back to Warframe than it managed to steal in the first place, and somebody at Destiny accidentally hit the self-destruct button, Warframe is now experiencing a bit of a renaissance even in the mainstream. So I guess my moment has finally arrived. After a huge shout out to all generous channel members who helped me keep the lights on, let's take a look at Warframe in 2024 and answer the question, 11 years in, is it too late to still start Warframe? Well, of course not. Thank you for watching, and as always, good loot! Yeah? So you're saying that... Okay, I'll get right back to you. Alright, management just told me that some of you watching probably never played the game and came here for an actual review. Let's talk about it. Okay, when discussing Warframe, there is one key question that comes up time and time again and has somewhat turned into a community meme by now. And that is the question, what Warframe even is, with veterans often claiming that it's kinda everything and nothing at the same time, and you can't really put a label on it. But you know what? I disagree. Warframe is a co-op looter shooter, period. It surely has a ton of content besides just looting and shooting, like open world, spaceship combat, and, skateboarding. And truth be told, that does blur the lines between genres quite a bit. But what you're going to be doing most of the time is playing all kinds of missions, crafting and refining new gear, even stronger weapons, more resources, bigger numbers, and shinier... shinies? Well, Warframe has this in its very DNA, and it scratches that itch extremely well, to the point that the endgame turns into such an absurd power fantasy, you might as well think you're playing Dynasty Warriors. However, before I get ahead of myself, how about we take a look at what playing Warframe actually looks like in practice, and, you know, one of these here would really help the channel, so big love to you. Now, when talking about how Warframe is structured, then I always like to imagine it as a linear path, starting at the first mission on Earth, leading us from planet to planet until we finally reach the end of the star chart. And you know what? How about we talk a bit more about exactly these missions? Warframe has a metric ton of different mission types, from simple exterminations, where you have to kill a set number of targets, to a variety of stationary defenses, and then also some more exotic stuff, like mixing together elemental chemicals in a gigantic blender to create even more carnage and kill everything around you. It's difficult to give a set number here because it always comes down to how you're counting, but I'd say we're talking around about 24 different mission types and variations here to ensure the game doesn't become repetitive, a system that is further amplified by the fact that every single tile set is randomly generated to ensure that even multiple runs of the same mission never feel fully identical. Now, if you're anything like me, then you're probably thinking, randomly generated? Isn't that the game developer's way of saying our level design is complete and utter horse poop? Well, yeah, for most games this might probably be the case, but when we're talking about Warframe, they really excel at this very technology, to the point where I personally often find myself enjoying the randomly generated missions even more than the handcrafted open world experiences. Like, sure, deep down, I know very well I'm just repeatedly running algorithmically generated content of the same rooms, simply shuffled in a different order time and time again, but still, every run is just different enough to trick my brain into thinking I'm doing something fresh. The feeling further amplified by the sheer amount of visual variety on the different planets. Starting on what is essentially an overgrown post-human version of Earth where flora and fauna have long reconquered the remnants of human society, through the deserts of Mars colonies and high-tech space fleets, all the way up to a sort of Lovecraftian Gothic laboratory. There's just so much varying design that meets the eye here, with this super unique art style on top. If I personally were to start the game for the first time today, then one of the main reasons driving me forward would simply be the curiosity of what awaits me on the next planet. But randomly generated missions are of course not the only thing that you'll encounter in your playthrough. From time to time, the game requires you to complete certain cinematic story quests. These are the main way in which Warframe tells its story and gives you more background info on its universe, lore, and while some of these quests are nothing more than a series of standard missions with some dialogue sprinkled on top, there are also absolutely massive, hours-long experiences with handcrafted sets, fully voiced cutscenes, and plot twists that you would have never seen coming. It's easy to look at Warframe and see a surface-level action game where story is nothing more than a cheap tool to send you into the next enemy base to kill stuff, but if you stick with it for a bit, you will uncover what lies beneath the surface and find more story content than even some AAA single-player games have on offer. But what is all the cool story and level design in the world if the game simply isn't enjoyable? I mean, after all, if you like good stories, you might as well watch a movie. Well, not that movie in particular, but I think you get what I'm saying here. No, what makes or breaks any game is the simple question of, is it fun to play? And when we're talking about Warframe, then this is the one big elephant in the room. Warframe is exceptionally fun, especially if you come from a background of having played mostly grounded traditional shooters. Watch any person out there playing the game for the first time and you can't help yourself but love their wholesome reactions when they're caught completely by surprise with Warframe's movement system and the absolute insanity that it allows you to pull off. See, Warframe is being advertised as a space ninja game, and that's fair to a point, but I personally think Space John Wick infused with the Captain America serum in The Matrix would describe it a lot better. Warframe simply lets you get away with pretty much anything. You can roll, you can slide, run up walls, jump, dash, and chain all these movements together into unreal parkour maneuvers. If you've ever seen one of these sick Assassin's Creed parkour edits on TikTok, then Warframe pretty much lets you do the entire thing yourself, but without much effort, all while at the same time bashing enemies and returning fire with what feels like the arsenal of a small country. No matter if you like Warframe or not, no matter if you stuck with it or dropped out at some point, one thing I think every single player can agree on is just how insanely fun the core gameplay loop, the moving through the level, the shooting, and the smoothness of it all simply is. It's just this beautiful dance. Beautiful for you, might I say, the player. Not for the enemy, they just get squashed like insects under your boot. The only thing I could imagine that might come close would be Titanfall 2, though I've unfortunately never played it myself, so I can't tell from my own experience. But since I've already mentioned the absolute insanity that is your arsenal, how about we take a closer look at all the nice stuff the game has in store for us. Now, first of all, Warframe does not let you create your own character. Instead, you can look at it as more of a hero-based game where you can unlock, at the point of writing this, 57 unique Warframes, all offering different skills and playstyles, with many of them even having an improved, and more importantly, way cooler looking, primed version. Every Warframe then can be equipped with one primary, one secondary, and one melee weapon, as well as a companion that provides assistance in your missions. And here we find one key difference between Warframe and many other looter shooters. While in other entries, the things that you're looking for are usually guns with randomized stats on them, in Warframe, every single weapon is handcrafted with its stats being fixed. Also, you're mostly not looting these weapons, but rather obtain their blueprints and components to then craft them in your foundry with the resources that you've acquired along the way. Oh yeah, and did I mention there are over 500 individual weapons at the point of writing? That's a lot, and there will be the perfect one for you too. But yeah, The loot that you're trying to get in Warframe is not so much weapons and equipment like in other games, but rather it's all about mods. What are those mods? See, mods are Warframe's unique gameplay mechanic. Simply put, a mod is an upgrade card that increases certain stats. These mods exist for weapons, warframes, as well as pretty much anything else in the entire game, and there are a lot of them. The main thought here is that most weapons and warframes are pretty trash at first and only become stronger as you equip them with the right mods. You know, adding more damage, crit chance, the right elements for the enemy faction you're up against, and much more. I've already made multiple guides on the basics as well as more advanced details of the entire modding system, so I don't want to go too deep into the whole topic with this video. Just know that in Warframe, your power does not come from getting the right weapons and warframes, but from having the right mods equipped on them. This, by the way, then also has the nice side effect that pretty much anything in the game is at least somewhat viable if done right. But, you know, as much as I love the modding system and the absolute insanity that it allows us to put together, this whole topic leads me to what I think is unfortunately also the biggest flaw of the game. See, Warframe has been out since 2013, and because of the fact that it doesn't have a seasonal content system, any update that has ever been released is still out there in the game to be played. Don't get me wrong, I really love this approach and the positive side effect that FOMO, the fear of missing out, simply doesn't exist because of it, but as a new player, this can get very overwhelming very quickly. While yeah, the tutorial has been revamped many times over the course of the last 10 years and is in a pretty good state right now, once this roughly 1 hour-long mission ends, you are dumped into the cold water. You're in your spaceship with a whole bunch of consoles that have overwhelming interfaces, and even though there are little text descriptions, you will neither understand how mods work nor where you even have to go from here in terms of game progression. I mean, after all, it is quite telling that there are people like me making a living off of just explaining the different facets and details of this game. Look, it gets better after 100 hours is a very popular term in the MMO world that I think we've all heard at some point, and I hate it. I don't want to have to slog through the dirt just to eventually find gold, and I don't think this should be normalized. If your product isn't good enough right from the start, then chances are your product simply isn't all that good. Now, to be fair here, Warframe doesn't get good only after 100 hours. The fun gameplay and the addicting loop is there right from the start, and the developers continuously tweak the new player experience to streamline the whole process, but there is still room for improvement, and I want to see this trend continue for the updates to come. Now, you might be wondering, what does all of this mean for you as a new or potentially returning player? It's relatively simple. You will enjoy the game. You will have fun with the cool gameplay loop, but there will also be a point where you feel overwhelmed and don't know what to do next. Once this moment comes, you can either drop the game because you feel it simply isn't really for you, which, by the way, is a perfectly reasonable choice to make. However, if the game has hooked you and you don't want to quit all too easily, then you will probably have to look up guides. Now, of course, being one of the largest creators in Warframe, you will naturally find a ton of tailor-made videos for all the questions you might have right here on my channel. I even have a dedicated new player guides playlist right here. But you know what? I'm not the only one, of course. Whatever you need to know about the game is just one Google search away. There are YouTube videos on any Warframe and any weapon in the game, there are forums, a subreddit, and most importantly, a very useful and up-to-date wiki with all the information you could ever want. At the end of the day, the only thing you really need to do to not get overwhelmed and not get burned out is to simply ask, and you will find. Now, I could go on for hours about all the other fun stuff that the game has to offer, like the beautifully crafted open worlds, special late-game modes, or the astronomical amount of both functional as well as visual customization for your favorite Warframes. Fashion Frame is endgame after all. But instead, now that I already mentioned how the developers keep the game updated, we need to talk about the team behind Warframe, Digital Extremes, and of course, us, the community. The name Digital Extremes might not ring any bells for many of you out there. Unreal Tournament though, well, I think we all know that. And yes, Digital Extremes, the developers of Warframe, are also the developers of this iconic arena shooter. So it doesn't come as a surprise that this team knows what they're doing. However, being good at your job and having a ton of experience is only one pillar of what makes a studio stand out. And in a time where seemingly all big names in the industry one-up each other in a race to the bottom, laying off people, picking fights with their community, and seemingly self-sabotage in whatever way possible, gamers are naturally worried about the future of their beloved IPs, and rightfully so. But do you know who isn't worried? These guys. I'm happy to be able to say that everything seems to be fine in the world of Warframe, and I am glad to be a part of it. It simply is very rare to have a dev team that is so down to earth and willing to listen to their community. One of my favorite stories about Warframe is when, back in the day, the devs implemented what basically was a gacha mechanic where you could pay money to get randomized fur patterns for your pets, and when they saw how ridiculously high amounts of money this system was making them, they dropped it, preventing players from gambling away their life savings simply because they felt that's an unethical way to make money. Or let me share a relatively personal story from my side for a minute. For this year's TennoCon, their annual in-house event, I was invited and flown in as a VIP, and it was an absolute insane experience that I will never forget. However, what stood out to me even more is this. One day before the con was the day of this global Windows outage. You probably heard about it. And for whatever reason, at that time, I was in my hotel room experiencing what I can only assume must have been a panic attack or something, because I felt like I literally was dying right at the spot, and I've never had anything like that in my life before. So what I did was I called up Zach, the head of the creator team over at Digital Extremes, and I told him what was going on and that I wasn't really sure if I could make it to the event because of how bad I was feeling. And with all the anarchy that was going on in their office with every PC down, all of that the day before the biggest event of the year for them, he was still there trying to help me out, offering to get me to a doctor if I needed to, and all that stuff. Now, first of all, Zach, you are an absolute champ, and it really means a lot. Luckily, I felt much better the day after, and everything ended up being fine, but this is just another example of how deeply this company cares about their game, their community, and the kind of people who work there. Sure, not everything is always sunshine and rainbows, but I think I've never heard that much good about a single studio from so many independent sources as I did about Digital Extremes. And you know what? This also extends to us, the community ourselves. Now, I know it's kind of a common thing to praise the Warframe community for being this greatest thing ever and a huge big family where everybody loves each other and all is perfect, and there is definitely a lot of truth to it. However, with the dozens, sometimes even hundreds of comments that I'm getting on a daily basis, I kind of feel there's a bit more nuance to it. If you are a new player, then everybody will welcome you. People will help you, answer your questions, and guide you along the way to the best of their abilities. As a new player, the Warframe fandom is an amazing place to be. I think we can all agree on that. However, there is also a very vocal minority in the community that loses their absolute marbles whenever there's something going on that they don't like. But then again, it still is the internet after all, and those who aren't happy with the product are 10 times more likely to shout their anger into the void, meaning, after all, 99% of the Warframe community are probably really chill, and what's more important, way less toxic than what you'd be dealing with in many other online games. So, cheers to you. You deserve it. And as a little side note, here's everyone from my community who, at the time of writing, wanted to share their love for the game. Link to the community post in the description. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like this whole section on the developers and the community got a bit out of hand. So let's, for a moment, go back to another topic that I definitely wanted to share some thoughts on, and that would be the monetization. Warframe is a free-to-play game with an optional cash shop. But we're not talking about free-to-play in the sense that it's free to download, but if you want to make any meaningful progress, you gotta cash in. No, every single gameplay-relevant detail of this game is obtainable through just playing the game alone, and you can do so with reasonable amounts of grind. I feel Warframe really respects my time. The only things that are exclusively premium are cosmetics, but then again, there is a trading system so that you can even earn platinum, the premium currency, without ever having to spend a dime, and this goes both ways. I often get comments from people who work a stressful job, maybe even have a small child, and they just don't have the time to grind for hours on end. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who really despise the types of players who simply buy all their equipment from real money without having quote-unquote earned it, but I personally think it's phenomenal that Warframe gives us the chance to simply buy pretty much anything we want from other players. It allows busy people to also enjoy the game at a reasonable pace, so cheers to what I like to call Warframe's version of pay to win. It's great, it's probably the fairest business model I have ever seen in a live service game. Please never change that. Now, there are so many more things that I could go over here. The lore, the music, the semi-standalone modes of roguelike open world Taviri and Railjack, the spaceship combat part, or the upcoming Warframe 1999, which looks like it's going to turn Warframe on its head once again. But you know what? I leave all these things up to you to explore for yourself. If you're still here now, then chances are Warframe might be worth a try, especially if you come from a looter-shooter background and you're looking for a welcoming game that isn't currently in the process of picking itself apart. Warframe is here for you. It is here for all of us, with 11 years of content just waiting to be experienced once again. And if you ever feel like you need help along the way, then guess what? I and many others are here for you too. So, with all that being said, 11 years in, is it too late to still start Warframe? No. Thank you for watching. Another big shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nostalix Gaming, Laika and Shepherd, Turtlepeer, Pepperwolf, Anakanio2, Misfire DX, Streamjet21, SignUpKing 5000, Gribblip Geeksy, Mihawk HE, Yagis, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.